Welcome to Explosive Enterprises, and today we finally deliver the content everyone's been begging for.
Projectile physics.
Yeah, not the most exciting stuff, but if you can bear with us and pardon the lack of Subway Surfers, Minecraft parkour, jingling keys, whatever other inane distraction device is currently the rage, we're going to show you the single most effective upgrade you can make to your airsoft gun. There's a lot of misinformation about BB weight that really stems from one widely believed myth, which is that heavy BBs go farther but are easier to dodge. Well, the first half is true, heavy BBs do go farther than lighter ones, but they're actually harder to dodge, at least at the ranges where it matters, and understanding why this is true is key to understanding airsoft ballistics. I'm going to refer to data from the Airsoft Trajectory Project, an old physics simulation that modeled the performance of various weights of BBs. If you don't trust the early 2000s graphs, don't worry, we'll be experimentally demonstrating some of this later. So to start with, a 0.2 gram BB at 1.49 joules leaves the muzzle at 400 FPS, but as little as 50 feet from the muzzle, it's down to about 220 FPS. By the time it reaches 100 feet, it's only going a measly 125 FPS and has less than 10% of its original kinetic energy. It starts off at high speed, but bleeds off 90% of its energy in the first 100 feet of travel. Meanwhile, a 0.3 gram BB at 1.49 joules starts at a more sedate 328 FPS, but at 50 feet it's at 220 FPS, the same speed as the 0.2 at the same distance, and at 100 feet it's still going 150 FPS, which is not only faster than the 0.2 gram, but has about twice as much kinetic energy. The reason for this is air resistance. This goes up exponentially with velocity, so the faster the BB is going, the sharper its deceleration. As well, heavy BBs have more mass and so experience less deceleration for a given drag force. A 0.2 gram BB going 400 FPS and a 0.3 gram BB going 328 FPS have the same muzzle energy, but the 0.2 experiences over double the deceleration right out of the gate. Light BBs start off faster, but heavy BBs retain their speed. Here's the point. Instead of looking at velocity over time, let's look at distance over time. The 0.2 gram BB reaches 50 feet in about 0.18 seconds. 100 feet in about 0.48 seconds, and 150 feet at over a full second of flight time. The 0.3 gram BB reaches 50 feet in 0.2 seconds, 100 feet in about 0.45 seconds, and 150 feet in 0.85 seconds. The light BB reaches the target a tiny fraction of a second sooner at 50 feet, but at longer ranges it's actually the heavy BB that gets there first. Slow and steady wins the race. In fact, we see that the break-even point is as little as 90 to 100 feet. Closer than that, a few hundredths of a second doesn't make any practical difference, but farther than that, a difference of a few tenths of a second might make the difference between a hit and a near miss. I know this might all sound hard to believe, so let's show a practical demonstration against a target at just over 100 feet. First, we have a gun tuned to 1.5 joules firing 0.2s. By analyzing the audio waveform, we can calculate that the BBs took 0.52 seconds to hit. Now we switch to 0.32s at just a bit under 1.5 joules. And running the same analysis, we get a value of 0.54 seconds. With the margins of experimental error in this test, these are functionally equivalent, showing virtually identical time to target at 100 feet despite the much lower starting FPS of the heavier BB, and beyond this range, the heavy BB actually gets there first. On top of that, quicker time to target at typical outdoor ranges is not the only reason to use heavy BBs. Heavy BBs also go noticeably farther before dropping, they retain significantly more kinetic energy, so they're much more likely to be felt and called when they do hit, more mass makes them more resistant to wind, and they penetrate intervening obstacles like brush better. So if heavier is better, logically the question is, why aren't we all using the absolute heaviest BBs we can find, like 0.69 grams, nice, or whatever? Well, first, from a practical perspective, the cost of BBs goes up exponentially once you go past about 0.32 grams, and 150 BBs for $45 is not particularly economical. Second, really heavy BBs need more hop effect to lift them, and not all guns can do that without modification. And third, the heavier you go, the longer distance you're optimizing for at the cost of longer time to target at shorter range. For example, if we look at the stats for 0.43 gram BBs at 1.49 joules, we see that they reach 50 feet at 0.2 seconds, 100 feet at 0.5 seconds, 150 feet at about 0.82 seconds, and 200 feet at 1.35 seconds. That means your target has to be more than 150 feet away for 0.43s to get there sooner than 0.3s. And while the .43s can go significantly farther, it's difficult to hit a moving or aware target at 250 feet if it takes your BBs almost 2 full seconds to reach them. Once you reach the optimal BB weight for your typical engagement range, then going heavier becomes a trade-off rather than a straight upgrade, sacrificing time to target in exchange for longer maximum range, better wind resistance, blah blah blah, all the stuff I said before. And if you go too heavy, then the optimal range for your BBs may be farther than the range your gun can actually make hits at, and you might as well drop down to a lighter weight you can make the most of. Still, ideal BB weights are heavier than players tend to think, especially for relatively low power guns. Regardless of the gun's power, at 100 to 150 feet, the shortest time to target comes from .3s and heavier. Even at 1 joule, a .3 gram BB reaches 150 feet in just under 1.1 seconds, and while that's more than the .85 seconds of a 1.5 joule gun, it's almost identical to the flight time of the .2 gram BB fired at 1.5 joules. Airsofters will tell you that you can't use heavy BBs in a stock Tokyo Marui because they'll be too slow and too easy to dodge from a distance, and then they'll go and use setups that are exactly as easy to dodge anyways. Pro tip, the actual reason people are dodging your BBs is because you're playing Airsoft and it's going to happen no matter what you use. But regardless, that brings us to our last point, which is that BB weight matters more than FPS. The .3 at 1 joule has comparable range and time to target at typical engagement ranges to the .2 at 1.5 joules, but also has those advantages in residual energy, wind resistance, brush penetration, at the cost of a whopping 0.05 of a second longer flight time at 50 feet. Of course, using .3s at 1.5 joules is even better, but the difference in time to target and maximum range between 1 joule and 1.5 joules using the same BB weight is only about 15 to 20%, and range tends to be limited more by hop quality than raw power anyways. So while higher muzzle velocity does improve performance, BB weight has a more direct impact. Okay, I know this has been a bit of a ramble, so if you've gotten this far, here are some practical recommendations. At 1 joule or higher, there's basically no reason to go below .3s unless you exclusively play indoors and want to save a couple bucks a bag. 1 joule will see the best practical time to target with .3s or .32s, but you can go as high as .36 to maximize performance at long range. At 1.5 joules, we recommend .32s or .36s, and again you can go a bit further with .4s, though again at the cost of longer time to target at typical engagement ranges. And similarly at 2 joules, .36 grams to .43 grams gets an ideal balance, but you can always go heavier if you want to maximize range. As a practical example, here's one of the XE crew using .4s in an R-hopped rifle at just 1.4 joules, taking out an enemy sniper at 260 feet. It's at the limit of his range and takes a couple of shots to zero in, but heavy BBs and a good hop allow him to make a kill that our normal rifles and even 1.8 joule MMGs couldn't.
Now's our chance! There's a guy on the right-hand side.
Please leave a comment about how your 1 joule rifle shoots 300 feet flat with .25s. I haven't been getting enough bad range estimates from Reddit lately. Anyways, .32 grams is the heaviest weight before prices start to skyrocket, so if you want to buy just one weight that you can use in everything everywhere, stock up on .32s and call it a day. Compared to lighter BBs, it's a noticeable improvement in performance with no real downsides and minimal difference in cost, which is why we consider the use of heavy BBs a no-brainer upgrade. If you have any questions, feel free to ask down in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching.